All right, today we're jumping into some really powerful stuff from Leonard Ravenhill. Now, if you don't know him, he was a 20th century evangelist who, let's just say, did not mince words. He looked at the church of his day and saw a big problem, a lack of what he called unction in the pulpit and not enough action in the pews. So let's get into it and unpack what he was really getting at.
And Ravenhill, he doesn't ease into it. Nope. Right out of the gate, he sets up this picture of two very different kinds of Christians. And you'll see this contrast is basically the bedrock of his whole argument.
So on one side, you've got what he calls the conventional Christian, someone who's just creeping along for years, kind of going through the motions. But then, bam, something happens, a switch flips, and that same person becomes what he calls a jet-propelled fellow, just bursting with this incredible energy and passion.
And this is where Ravenhill really throws down the gauntlet. He says this jet-propelled experience, well, it's not supposed to be some rare, abnormal thing. He argues it should be the normal Christian life. It really makes you wonder, right? What's the secret sauce here? What could possibly cause a transformation like that?
Well, lucky for us, he doesn't leave us hanging. He gets right to it and says this big shift from, just creeping along to totally zooming, it's fueled by two things, two absolutely critical components that need to work together. And those two things are vision and passion. And he is super clear about this. These are not just, good suggestions or nice ideas. He calls them indispensable. You have to have them. Without both, he argues, that vibrant, dynamic, spiritual life he's describing just isn't possible. And I love how he breaks down the relationship between these two ideas. Think about it. If you have a vision but no task, you're just a visionary, a dreamer. On the flip side, if you have a task with no vision, well, that's just pure drudgery, right? It's meaningless work. But when you put the two together, a vision with a task, that, he says, makes a missionary. Someone with both a purpose and a plan to act on it.
Okay, so what exactly is this vision he's talking about? What does it look like in practice? Well, to explain it, Ravenhill turns to the biblical prophet Isaiah as his case study, and he introduces this concept of a three-dimensional vision.
And here's the framework. It's really powerful. First, there's an upward vision. You see the Lord. Then that leads to an inward vision. You see yourself in light of who God is. And finally, that perspective pushes you to an outward vision. You see the world and its needs. See how they connect? One flows directly into the next.
And this three-part vision, according to Ravenhill, is the absolute engine that drives everything else. This is where that unction in the pulpit comes from, that real spiritual weight and authority, and it's also the catalyst for action in the pew, getting people motivated to actually do something. And man, he does not sugarcoat these definitions. The upward vision is about seeing God's pure holiness. The inward vision, it's about seeing our own brokenness, what he bluntly calls our hellishness. And that outward vision is a head-on confrontation with the deep hopelessness in the world. It's a pretty intense trio of perspectives.
And this is why he sees it as so important. I mean, look at this quote. He raises the stakes as high as they can possibly go. He says, without vision, the people perish, period. And without passion, the church perishes, even if it's packed to the rafters every Sunday.
So to really hammer home that final piece, the outward vision, that look at the world's hopelessness, he shifts gears. He wants to make this feel incredibly real and urgent, so he starts pulling out some jarring global statistics from his time to paint a picture of a world in absolute crisis.
First up, he points to Japan. He throws out the number 87 million people. He's using these massive figures to create this overwhelming sense of scale, just to show how huge the need is.
Then he pivots to post-war Europe, highlighting the 11 million people who were displaced persons. Refugees. This isn't just a number. He's pointing to immense, real-world human suffering.
And then he hits you with this last one, a stat designed to just stop you in your tracks. He claims that almost 1 million people in the world die every single week without Christ. And for him, these aren't just abstract numbers on a page. No way. Each one represents an urgent, desperate call to action. But numbers can only go so far, right? So to really bring this all home, Ravenhill wraps up with this unforgettable story. It's about a man on death row named Charlie Peace. And this anecdote, it perfectly ties together everything he's been arguing about vision, passion, and urgency.
So, picture this. It's the fatal morning at Armley Jail. Charlie Peace is walking to the gallows to his execution. And in front of him is the prison chaplain, who's just kind of sleepily and robotically reading scripture about heaven and hell.
And suddenly, Charlie Peace stops the whole procession. He's looking at this chaplain, and he's not scared of dying. He's absolutely shocked by the preacher's complete lack of passion. And then,
this condemned man turns and preaches a sermon to the clergyman. He basically says, "Sir, if I believed what you say you believe, I would crawl across England on my hands and knees over broken glass just to save one person from the hell you're so casually reading about."
And wow, that's the knockout punch, isn't it? The core of Ravenhill's entire argument, delivered by a man about to die. It's this scathing critique of a faith that exists only in the head, with no fire in the heart. And it really leaves us with a challenging question, one that just kind of hangs in the air. What's the real difference between just knowing a truth and being utterly gripped by it?